Here to set you free. How you doing? I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back. Happy Friday, TGIF. I'm sorry for those of you who are Midwest, East Coast, even some in the South. I had to come inside today because it was just too hot at 78 degrees in the sun with no shade. I know, just take that knife and twist it, right? Get the salt, pour it in the wound. Anyway, I'm glad to have with us today Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. And the AAM is a partnership established by some of America's leading manufacturers and the United Steelworkers Union. Now, for decades, Scott and the AAM have worked to make American manufacturing a top of mind issue for voters, for our national leaders, and they've done it through effective advocacy, innovative research, and a savvy PR strategy. And you know what, Scott? I got to say, when you first started coming on the show, before I even knew you, if you remember, you never heard manufacturing numbers when you heard job numbers released, and now it's like its own category. So you guys are doing something right, right? And speaking of that, their website is americanmanufacturing.org. On YouTube, check out their YouTube channel, youtube.com/@ American MFG. And there at that YouTube channel, you can watch episodes of AAM's podcast, The Manufacturing Report. If you want to listen to episodes of The Manufacturing Report, just go to the americanmanufacturing.org/podcast. Follow on X, AAM at Keep It Made in USA. Follow Scott on X at Scott Paul AAM. And on Blue Sky at Keep It Made in USA.bsky.social. Lots to talk about today. Scott, thank you for joining us. Happy Friday.
Hey, it's great to be with you. I'm not jealous at all that it's about 50 degrees warmer where you are than where we are.
Oh, you're not because you like cold weather, right?
Uh, I wish I was being just a little snarky there, Leslie.
Throwing it back at me,
Everyone
Pete.
wants to be in Los Angeles or San Diego right now.
Yeah, throwing it back at me. I know yesterday it was bad. I was rubbing it in with my own mother. She's like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "I'm sitting by my pool." She's like, "Oh, rub it in, rub it." It's like, hey, it's a choice. Huh? I have to do that because California gets, attacked
Yeah,
and demonized on a daily
right,
basis by our
right.
politicians on the right, but they can't stop coming here for their vacations or escapes from their cold weather. It's amazing.
That's exactly
But
right.
that's another show. Why manufacturing could be turning a corner? Because, it seems it is, although it does seem with some of the numbers doom and gloom. And let's talk about this. One of the things I like about having you on the show, Scott, is that you simplify, you explain in simple terms for people that, aren't manufacturing number crunching wonks out there. America right now has experienced a manufacturing job slump, sadly, for a long time, the past 34 months. But we are seeing trends, five of them specifically, emerging this year in 2026 that could reignite that growth. Whether it's trade to AI, U.S. factories are poised, a lot of people say, or at least numbers seem to show, for a rebound. And this is the subject of an article that you recently wrote for the AAM website, Scott, titled Five Factory Trends to Watch in 2026. So, first, you start by saying this could be a really important year for U.S. manufacturing. Now, for some people out there listening or watching that don't follow this closely, what's changed that could make this year different?
It's a good question, and I'm gonna add a couple of stipulations at the beginning, Leslie, which is I don't know everything. I don't have a crystal ball. There's a lot of stuff that could happen, right?
Well, that's it. Show's
Yeah.
over. No.
Right, exactly. And the other thing is that, manufacturing's not a monolith. It's not just like one big, industry that's w where everything sees even impacts and like tariffs hit everybody the same way or, demand or what have you. And so there's always going to be differences, right?
Right.
But I do think that if things go right, and I will say, not yet, okay, these trends are not yet here. I think they could be here by the end of the year. And I'm taking this outside of politics, right? There will be more headwinds than tailwinds for manufacturers. And it's been kind of a bit of a roller coaster because the pandemic, like everything closed down and then it opened back up. And then people bought a lot of stuff because they couldn't do anything else. And then they stopped buying things because they could go travel again. And, China has its own strategy where it's just producing a massive amount of stuff. And then you have Trump coming in and shifting policy. And so there have been some really jarring changes, right? And so I think that, there ought to be a little more, a little more certainty about the direction we're heading by the end of the year. And so that's why I say it could be an important year for the industry.
In your article, the piece I had just mentioned, the five factory trends to watch in 2026, you talk about a few things. You talk about lowering interest rates. You talk about clearer trade rules. You talk about a better overall economy lining up. In plain English, for the people that aren't inside the manufacturing bubble, um, how do those things actually lead to more factory jobs? And we can just, break it down. Like how do lower interest rates lead to more factory jobs?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there are a couple of very direct ways. First of all, when you think about someone making a big purchase, right? Either a car or an appliance, sometimes that requires finance, right? And the higher the interest rates, the less someone can afford, or it might price them all out altogether. And I know like interest rates for buying a car were sky high, and they're coming down a little bit, but they're still not super low, but the direction has been a bit lower, and so that will allow more people to make that decision. So that's one way. The other way is through manufacturers themselves. I mean, manufacturers, because of the nature of the industry, have to borrow to put in place equipment that will allow them to grow, basically, because these are very, very expensive purchases, these big, like, several $1 million machines. So they have to get financing for that. And when, again, the finance costs are high, when interest rates are high, um, they can afford to do less, or it might even be prohibitive that way. So if interest rates come down, it helps consumers, it helps manufacturers make capital investments, and so that's what you call a tailwind. And so that's one very tangible way where manufacturing could be better off this year than it was, say, before. And again, this has nothing to do with like who is president. It's just
Hmm.
like how the
Right.
economy is doing
Exactly.
and what the Federal Reserve decides to do as well. And I do hope it stays independent. It should stay
Right.
independent. That's
I
what
agree.
gives us some certainty. But I think that it's been a problem for manufacturing the last couple of years.
Absolutely. I think, a lot of people might say, well, this is common sense, but people really don't know why it's common sense. And that's about how clearer trade rules lead to more factory jobs. But maybe you could speak to that and and
Yeah.
and piggyback tariffs onto it as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, one of the trends that I cited overall was tariffs, but specifically how it lends itself to jobs, is really because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to like figure out there have been a lot of changes in tariffs, right? I mean, really, I mean, there have been hundreds of changes. And so if you're trying to follow that and you're trying to, again, I just pointed to like a decision to buy a big machine. You don't want to buy a big machine if you think that the tariff structure is going to be different, in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, and your competition's going to be different or your cost is going to be different. And so you want to have that certainty. So the closer or the sooner that we can arrive at that certainty about what the tariff rate's going to be, whether it's going to be 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever, just like kind of give me a number. Um, the more of these decisions are going to be unlocked because once you know what that cost is going to be, say a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now in some cases, that will give manufacturers more certainty about some of these very, very expensive decisions that they'll make, either about hiring or about putting into equipment or about honestly where they're going to make stuff. Are they going to make it in another country or are they going to make it
Yeah.
here? But we got to arrive at that endpoint. We're definitely not there yet. We're not even
Right.
close,
And,
unfortunately.
and and those two things obviously weigh into a better overall economy lining up or lineup. You also mentioned real risks. You mentioned rate changes, policy uncertainty, even unexpected shocks. But you still, oh, I'm going to get back to that question. I didn't realize where, my clock and Mark's clock, my executive producer, aren't exactly in sync. I'm like, I got a break. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with Scott Paul, president of the AAM, right after this, and we'll talk more about about manufacturing and how hopefully it's going to be on the rise and those manufacturing jobs. We need that boom in this economy. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Who are we? I am Leslie Marshall. How you doing? Thank you for joining us. Scott Paul is our guest, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. And like I said, check out their website. So much to get there. So much information to get there. Almost every time I need to buy a gift, I always get there. Check it out. AmericanManufacturing.org. Also, Scott does a great podcast called The Manufacturing Report. And you get to really hear the stories. And I really enjoyed that behind these companies that make American goods. And as consumers, we should want to keep goods made in America, right? Go to their YouTube channel, youtube.com/at American MFG. And if you want to listen to episodes of the Manufacturing Report, just visit AmericanManufacturing.org/podcast. Follow them at Keep It Made in USA, them being the AAM, and follow Scott at Scott Paul AAM and on Blue Sky at keepitmadeinusa.bsky.social. We're talking about 5 factory trends to watch in 2026. And we talk about factories. We're talking about factories being built. We're talking about manufacturing and manufacturing. In why it could be turning a corner, and we need it to. Scott, before the break, I was talking about your article about these 5 areas. You also mentioned, I'm going to reiterate that before the break, the real risks, so rate changes, policy uncertainty, even unexpected shocks, but you still sound, despite all of that, cautiously optimistic. So what gives you that confidence right now?
Yeah, I think that I don't see like interest rates like spiking back up, so I think that's favorable. And I do think that now we are probably a little more settled after the kind of pandemic buying boom and then kind of like settling down. And so I think there's a little more distance between that. And so people know what kind of like real demand is now. And so I think that's there. Um, but the last thing, and this is the thing, and I will say this is a big, again, a big asterisk, is that I think the tariff policy just has to get settled. And I'm not someone who thinks that we ought to have zero tariff rates. I think that there should be some tariffs on some products, because I think there's some unfair trade and there's some real risks. But you keep seeing that policy like move all over the place, right? And so
Yes.
how can you possibly again make a big decision? So I think and then the other reason, and this also has to do with like factory building, is that I travel around the country and we cover this on our blog, is that there have just been a lot of factories built in the United States. And some of this is due to Biden policies. Some of this is just due to what companies wanted to do after the pandemic, to have more made in the United States. Some of this is more because of consumer demand, and some of it's because of tariffs. And so you can't say that this is necessarily a Trump boom or a Biden boom or whatever, but it's just the fact that those factories are going to start coming into production. And so that should
Well,
put
let me
people
jump
to,
in and ask
yeah,
you
yeah.
because the headlines have been, and we've heard certainly for the past year, new factories being built. We've heard those announcements. We lived through the announcement phase. So why does 2026 matter more than that announcement phase that we've already lived through?
Yeah, it's because I do think that a lot of this is going to get started up and they're going to start making the products, whether it's semiconductors, like, there's a lot of factories that are under construction right now that should come online. A couple of the auto companies have built new factories. Rivian is one, for example, and there ought to be jobs there. Pharmaceutical factories. I was just back in my home state of Indiana and saw Lilly building a big factory outside of Indianapolis, and soon that should start, filling with people. And so
And that's really good to hear because we've
yeah,
seen 2 companies. I can't remember. Amazon was one, right?
yeah,
Thousands of
that's
jobs
right.
they're cutting.
Yeah, yeah,
And then there was another company. I can't remember which one it was. I just read it like 2 days ago. That's cutting thousands of jobs.
yeah.
And it's like, guys, we're going in the wrong direction. So it's good to hear. Sometimes these openings don't make the front page or that headline on the social media sites. And so if you just see the jobs that are being lost, the feeling. And economically for Americans, it's more about the feeling than the facts sometimes, right? I mean, it was like
Yeah,
during part of the Biden administration, the economy was booming, but people just didn't feel that way.
that's right.
And
Right.
right now,
Yeah.
that's what, they're people are very hesitant, almost like walking on eggshells, like you said, because of the uncertainty of, announcements with tariffs, trade deals, and things like that. But it's good to hear that factories are opening and factories are being built because we need to offset these jobs that are being lost in certain sectors and with these certain companies.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it took many, 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 many years for a lot of these global companies to say, hey, if we're going to sell in the United States, we ought to make more of it here. And it took a pandemic where there were supply chain disruptions. It took all sorts of other geopolitical stuff. It took tariffs. It took incentives offered by Biden. It took tariffs offered by Trump or whatever, you know. But finally, there are more companies they're saying we got to do it, and so we ought to be seeing the fruits of that, barring any other downturns or what have you, is that there should be some good news on the way. Now that doesn't. Manufacturing. I'm a realist here. I wish it were a larger sector of the economy. It's not the largest sector of the economy. And so we can add some jobs, but yeah, you're still, as you pointed out, you're still going to see those layoffs, in some places as well. And, but my hope is that instead of like contributing to the layoffs, like manufacturing has basically since February of 2023, that manufacturing is going to contribute to job growth. That would be my hope for the year, Leslie.
And you've talked about this before, but especially now that factories are being built and we're in 2026 getting out of that announcement phase, when one big factory opens, you say it often brings a whole network of smaller businesses with it. Now, there are people listening, there are people watching, or there are people that will be listening and watching this conversation that we're having, this interview. Um, what does that look like in real life for that town, for that region? Because obviously people listening and watching, that's what they care about because that's where they live.
Yeah, and that is a great question. And that's kind of what sets manufacturing apart from, say, a warehouse or a retail store or a hospital, is that once that factory goes in, it needs parts, and those parts have to be made somewhere. And oftentimes the parts suppliers want to be close to the factory, right? And then that factory also needs other equipment to run, like, hydraulic fluid and other things like that. And then there's shipping going in and out. And then the paychecks at that factory, they tend to be a little higher than what someone might earn, say, at the dollar store or in the retail sector. And those paychecks get spread around the economy. And so that helps the grocery store, the hardware store, and what have you. And so those knock-on or indirect effects can be very good. And so that's why you love to see a factory open in your hometown.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to touch more and talk more about those tariffs. We're going to talk more about trade, and we're going to talk about the the codependent relationship. Now, the country, we have a codependent relationship with, like, we need them, we don't want to need them, but we need them, and they need us, and that's China. We'll be back with Scott Paul, president of the AAM, and me, Leslie Marshall, and you, right after this. We are back. I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back. We're talking with the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, Scott Paul. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. Follow them on X at Keep It Made in USA. Follow Scott at Scott Paul AAM. And also check out his podcast, The Manufacturing Report. To watch it, go to youtube.com/ at American MFG. And to listen to it, episodes of The Manufacturing Report, visit AmericanManufacturing.org /podcast. I have to say, I really enjoy hearing stories of how people made their dream, the American dream, come true, and talking about their products. And these people are just so passionate about their products and about the love and care and attention to detail in their products. It's really interesting. Like, if you like shopping like I like, it's really interesting. It's almost like product porn, if you will. Scott, you can use that. You can quote me,
I
product
love it.
porn.
We're gonna clip and post, Leslie. That's what we're gonna do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about tariffs. We're going to talk about trade. We're going to talk about China, but more specifically, demystifying trade policy without the jargon, because that gets confusing for a lot of people. And you've said this past year, and I think we all know, it was really defined by tariffs, right? Everywhere we turned, we saw reports of tariffs. And for people, just working out there hard, everybody listening and watching, why did tariffs matter so much to US manufacturers? And people may think, oh,
Yeah.
that's common sense, but is it really?
Yeah, yeah. And I will say the impact is obviously different than like if you're a consumer going into the store and you bought coffee and it costs more, right? Because coffee is almost always made overseas and there was a tariff on it, and so you paid more, right? And so that's
Right.
yeah, I don't think that's a great application of tariffs at all, but there are some cases where it makes a great deal of sense, and that's where you have industries that are under constant attack by unfair trade practices. And unfortunately, China, because of its scope, its size, and also the ambitions of its government, that's had a big impact. And throughout the year, and yeah, it's been a year, we have seen so many different tariff policies that it would be hard to articulate what it is other than it's kept moving. It's a moving target constantly.
Right.
Um, and it will still move again because the Supreme Court hasn't ruled on some of these tariffs as all. And we're not going to get into a tariff lesson here because that would be utterly boring and it would take too long. But at the end of the day, for me, the most important tariffs for manufacturing are the ones that will allow the industry to grow, and that are applied in strategic sectors. And even Biden, agreed on this too. So it's just not like it's just Trump saying this. It's a lot of people saying this. Is like we need a steel industry in the United States. We need an
Absolutely.
auto industry in the United States. We need to build ships again in the United States. We need to make our medicines States. We need to make more semiconductors in the United States. We need to be able to process critical minerals that go into technology products here.
Hey,
And
listen,
so,
I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but for those people that feel that COVID came from a lab in Wuhan, China, um, then we really don't want to be purchasing medication from China or anywhere else. Hello, Russia.
yeah,
If we are perceived to be an enemy at any point, they could literally wipe us out.
yeah,
You know what
correct.
I mean? You
Yeah,
you, you take a pill and drop dead. I'm just saying. I mean, that would be a way to poison
yeah,
people, right, and get to
yeah,
people directly. That would be a very cruel form of biological warfare. But yeah,
yeah,
I have to say, it's very different if and even though people shouldn't, it's different if you're getting, I don't know, your paper napkins from Walmart versus your medication
yeah,
from China. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
There
there's
is a national security aspect
health
element.
risks and national security and all of that. And so there are a lot of compelling reasons, but what I guess frustrates me is that, A, the policy still isn't settled. It could certainly move, and either the Supreme Court or the Trump administration could do something. And B, it's interesting on China. Trump went a lot harder after China in his first term than he has in this term. And he started
Yes.
out saying, I'm going to do these tariffs that are 100 and whatever percent, which was also kind of like, really out there if you have no alternative to that. The better policy would have been build up our capacity and gradually put tariffs on China so that,
Yep.
we have the ability to make it here and we're not dependent, as you indicated, on China for certain things. But
Right.
it's
Titrate up.
been yeah,
Right.
it's been interesting on China that he hasn't been as tough as he was in the past. And so for
Good point.
businesses that are competing head to head against China, you kind of still don't know what the case is really
Right.
here. And so yeah, it could go either way, Leslie.
You suggest that we may be past the peak of new tariffs. What signs are you seeing that things might be starting to level out?
Yeah, because I mean, they've been quiet announcements, but they have happened that some tariffs are being delayed for a couple of years, that others are being taken off, like the tariffs on foodstuffs that we don't make here, for instance. And so yeah, I don't see a lot of new tariffs. Now, I want to be very careful about how I say this because that doesn't mean the threats aren't going to be there. Like particularly, and you see this almost every day. Trump doesn't like anything, doesn't like something. He says, I'm going to tariff Canada for this or Denmark for that or what have you. But I've learned, and I hope people have learned too, that, give it a couple of days to
Yeah, his
marinate.
bark's bigger than his bite with tariffs.
Yeah,
And I
right.
mean, I
And see
think
how it
Mark
looks.
Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, is a perfect example of somebody who's like, I'm not playing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so rather than get caught up in that hype, I'm just like, okay, let's see what happens in a couple of weeks and whether we should, we need to take this seriously or not. And
Right.
someone did an estimate that on, only 25% of the tariff threats have been actualized, right?
Right. No,
Versus
and
what
they're
he
I
said.
mean, and it's very confusing. I mean,
Oh,
for
totally.
America, it's very confusing. Look, I mean, look what we do for a living. It's confusing for us. And
Yeah.
I mean, but there's
Yeah.
times when you think about it when it's like I'm placing a 40% tariff. Okay, I'm going to reduce it by 30%. I'm going to reduce it by 10%. And then I'm going to add 15%. But at the beginning, we already had 15% tariff. So
Right.
basically, we just walked in a circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it gets really crazy. So that we get to it and have the time for it. China,
Yeah.
you talk about a lot. You mentioned it. Now they are still a big unknown. How
Yeah.
has the U.S.-China manufacturing relationship changed, and why should Americans care about that shift, Scott?
Yeah. Well, first of all, China's so big. I mean, it's the biggest manufacturer in the world, right? So anything that it does is a problem. It's also the biggest exporter in the world by far. It has $1 trillion surplus in trade in manufactured products. So it's massive, right? Um, and as I said, Trump is kind of like taking the foot off the gas pedal on going after China a little, because he realizes that China has some weapons to utilize too, right? Like because
Mhm.
they process all the minerals, and so it becomes a bit of a challenge. And there's some evidence that that the trade deficit with China is coming down, and it has been coming down for some period of time. And so that's obviously a positive thing. But you to back to your point about like the medicine, like there is a real risk in some products that we're kind of over leveraged, and we do need, in addition to tariffs, we do need to find a way to have incentives to make some of that in the United States so that we can do it affordably, with quality, at scale. And that's going to take more than just tariffs alone. And so I hope that when Trump gets together with the Chinese leader Xi, that it's not just I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you that, that we're really defending American workers and interests here and our security because it's critically important as we look ahead. And I'm less convinced this time than I was, say, 6 years ago, that he's committed to really totally changing the dynamic here.
And that's because he just hasn't been as hard on China, and he hasn't talked about China. It hasn't seemed as much a priority for him this time around, right?
Yeah, I think so. And just as prioritize stability, in that rather than seeing something where China could get leverage in something and cause a shortage. Like if they cut off rare earth minerals, our auto industry would shut down for weeks, and our tech industry too. It'd be a real problem.
Right. And certainly people on the right would say, well, that's why he keeps talking about Greenland. We'll be back with Scott. We'll be back with you. When we come back, we're going to talk about workers. We're going to talk about training. We're going to talk about something I've been so excited to talk to Scott about, and that's AI, the AI factor. Be back. Back, I'm Leslie Marshall. He is Scott Paul, president of the AAM, the Alliance for American Manufacturing. You can follow them on Blue Sky at Keep It Made in USA. .bsky.social. Follow Scott on X at Scott Paul AAM. Follow AAM at Keep It Made in USA. And speaking of, Scott talks to people that are making it in the USA in his podcast, The Manufacturing Report. Watch it at youtube.com/AdAmericanMFG and listen to it, The Manufacturing Report, episodes of that. Go to americanmanufacturing.org/podcast. The website is another area you can get a lot of information. There are links there to a lot of this, all of this, americanmanufacturing.org. We will continue our conversation with Scott. Scott, thank you for holding and for a welcome back. So let's talk about workers training, the AI factor, and bringing it back to the people and the future. A lot of manufacturers say their biggest problem isn't demand, it's finding workers. And we see that, right? We see a lot of help wanted signs and people are like, I don't understand, especially it's like they're stealing our jobs. It's like, well, there are jobs. How come you're not applying for those jobs? And you highlight new short-term training programs. Why could those make a difference? And
Yeah.
where are those?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like in the olden days, all a manufacturer had to do, and also because the skill level of the job was just go into a shop class and say, "Hey, who wants a job when you graduate from high school?" And just pull kids out and do it that way. Obviously, two things have changed. There's not a lot of shop classes anymore, and the jobs are higher skilled. Here's the challenge. Pell Grants. Pell Grants are awesome. They provide low-income students with a chance to go to college. The challenge has been for like manufacturing training programs is that they only applied for like associate's degrees or higher. And for some of these manufacturing training, you don't need that much. You might need 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 15 weeks, to learn how to, it might be welding or industrial maintenance or something like that. And so you couldn't access that, particularly if you were, if you come from a disadvantaged low income family. One of the, and believe me, there are plenty of problems with the tax legislation that was passed last year. Something that does have a lot of support was a change to Pell Grants to make these kind of manufacturing training programs eligible. And so if you're if you're from a if you're either yourself uh, quite poor or you come from a poor family, you'll be able to get free a training program to that will
Correct.
help you get into a factory. So that's going to help immensely, particularly because, Leslie, the manufacturing workforce is pretty old. It's about 4 years older than the rest of the workforce in the United States. And that means
Really,
more,
I would never have guessed
yeah.
that.
Yeah, and more, so that means more people are retiring, right? And
Right.
so that means the more people are retiring, you got to replace them, and it hadn't been as easy to replace them. So this will help quite a bit. And so I'm optimistic that that will provide, a good lever for small and mid-sized manufacturers to get access to more, more skilled workers who are able to get those credentials that they need now.
AI, I so wanted to talk to you about this. There is a boom, and it's going to increase, I think one would imagine, and certainly a push in this administration for these AI data centers. Those AI data centers, are they going to compete with factories for workers and energy? And is that already happening, or is that something that we should be planning for in the future?
Yeah, yes, yes, and yes. I mean, first of all, no one's figured out AI, right?
Right.
Either literally how to use it effectively, at least I haven't, or what it means for
Except
us.
except my son when he's writing an essay. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
like, did you
exactly.
even like, okay,
Yeah.
sidebar, right? My daughter, my daughter is going on a senior retreat
Hmm.
at her school. She goes to an all-girls school, and that's coming up in a week. And they ask people in the family to write letters of encouragement. So I asked her big brother, and they have a love-hate relationship. They're 9.5 months apart. And he wrote this beautiful letter, and it sounded like it was from Hallmark. And I'm like, did you write this? I think he did chat GPT or AI and was like, I need a letter that says nice things about my sister.
There you go.
I
Right.
think that's what it was.
It
Yeah.
it is extraordinary, and
But
everybody.
I do agree
Yeah.
with you in
Yeah.
the non-student teenage world. Yeah,
Yeah.
people haven't figured out
Yeah,
AI.
you haven't been able to grapple with it. But and that's true of the physical because this just isn't like this just didn't conjured into being. There are physical data centers that house all this computing power that figures this stuff out. And that takes a lot of equipment, that takes a lot of energy, that takes people to build these things, and they are massive, right? And so and the thing is, they're massive. At the end of the day, they're not going to employ a lot of people, but the construction of it is a big demand pull for materials and for people in construction trades, and for energy, right? They're going to consume a ton of energy and other
Right.
resources, and so when you're thinking about a manufacturing boom and an AI boom and how they can coexist, you have to answer the questions like that. How are you going to keep energy costs down and make sure that it's available to everyone and not raise rates for consumers? How are you going to have enough workers who are electricians, who are in construction, who are going to be able to do both the AI data centers and also the factories that are under construction and the materials that are going into the factories too. So this is all these are all real kind of pain points, and and I view this very much as a potential drag on manufacturing growth because everybody's all in on the AI, right?
Right.
Everybody wants to make a bet on AI, but if we go all in on AI and we're not considering what the impact on manufacturing is going to be, there's a very real chance that all of the progress that we've talked about or that we see the potential for talking about could be rolled back
Right.
if we don't get this right. And I'm not like, what's the right way to put this? Like AI is not going to take over a factory job, right? Because you
Right.
need a physical person there to operate the machine or
And we
So,
hope AI isn't going to take over like our medical
oh,
professionals.
there you go. I mean,
Yeah,
but
that would
right.
be scary. I
Yeah.
don't want a robot
Yeah.
operating on me, you know?
Yeah, but like customer service chatbots or stuff
Yeah.
like that, that's obviously we're already dealing with that stuff. But
It is, I know it's
yeah,
creepy. Maybe I'm getting too old. I mean,
no,
it is
no, you're
creepy.
it.
But I want to ask you because you
Yeah,
say if we get this right,
yeah,
and what you talk about in getting it right is training workers,
yep,
planning energy use,
correct.
balancing AI and manufacturing, right? So,
Yeah.
what does a healthy US manufacturing economy look like a year or really 5 years from now, as an example?
That is a great question. And so I think that it is possible for this to coexist, but if at the state level or on the energy grids or the workforce professionals, if they haven't thought about this, it could end up in disaster, really. And so we you have to put it front and center about how you're going to manage all of this and also not spike, for instance, electric bills for people.
Right.
And we've seen that in some areas as well. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you've heard of this too, where,
Yeah.
in some cases, the AI data centers, they're generating their own energy and they're being responsible that way. In other cases, not as responsible. And so we just I think we have to be very careful about how we do this and not to favor necessarily AI or over manufacturing. I think that would be a long run mistake because at the end of the day, the factory is going to have a lot of people in it. The AI data center is going to have a few people, really
Right.
that they're going to deal with. But
Well,
this is something that we got to be very thoughtful about.
I'm all into people building robots to do certain things like picking up my dog's poo in the backyard, you know? I don't understand how my dog can poo that much. I mean, how is it, I don't want to say humanly, doggingly possible. I'm just like, seriously, it's just like, I don't know. It reproduces itself. It's
You're gonna have to
insane.
get the opposable thumbs right on the robots to be able to do that. That's yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or don't laugh. They have my husband, as you know, is an orthopedic
Yeah.
surgeon, and they have the surgery center that they wanted doctors to try out. And they have AI there.
Hmm.
But one of the things, no joke, that they can do is they can go compliment, and it's like, you're such a great surgeon.
Oh
And
boy.
it's a sexy woman's voice or a woman with a sexy voice. And so like the crew in the OR while he's operating will just keep like compliment. You're
Yeah.
such, yes,
Oh
Dr.
my.
Blank, even though a lot of people know my husband's name, you're
Yeah.
such a great sir. I'm like, oh, Gag. Scott, yeah, let me see. How much time do we got going here? Let me see. I'm all over the place with my computer today. We have like a minute. Okay, what do you want to say in a minute or less, Scott?
No, I think the future could be bright, but we got to get some things right. It's not guaranteed, and people ought to be rooting for manufacturing, even if they have political differences with leaders who are pushing certain policies.
I'm totally with you. Manufacturing, it shouldn't be a, oh, Democrat or Republican issue.
That's right.
Job growth is good for the economy and it's good for the people. And it's especially good for the working class, which is the majority in the middle class of our country. Okay, we're saying bye.